I always believed that in life, you get what you deserve, that loyal women still exist, and when you find the right one, you hold on to her. I thought I had found that. In Lisa, we had our ups and downs, but deep down, I knew she wouldn't do anything to hurt me. At least that's what I wanted to believe. We all have dreams, don't we? Mine was simple. I wanted to live happily, side by side with someone I could trust, a partner for life, someone who would be with me through the good and the bad. Lisa and I had been together for years, and I was convinced we had that kind of connection. Sure, I had my doubts. Everyone does. But I always pushed them aside. I thought to myself, Lisa wouldn't cheat on me. She's not like that. But fear has a way of creeping in. Late at night, those thoughts would come. What if she wasn't the person I thought she was? What if my fear came true, and I was left standing alone? I buried those thoughts, though. It was easier to trust her than to deal with those nagging doubts. You know, I've never been the most successful guy. I've struggled to make a name for myself. I've never had much money or status, and I've always felt like I had to fight harder just to keep up. But when Lisa was with me, I felt like it didn't matter. She made me believe that I was enough. I've been through my share of failures, especially with women before Lisa. It always felt like I was on the outside looking in, never quite good enough, never quite what they wanted. But with Lisa, I thought I'd finally found the one person who would stay by my side. I held on to that belief so tightly, like it was the only thing keeping everything in place. It was one of those days that starts off perfectly normal. I was just going about my business when my neighbor, Greg, stopped me. We'd always had a friendly relationship, small talk, the usual stuff, but this time there was something different in his eyes. He had that look, you know, the kind that tells you something's wrong before they even open their mouth. I remember Greg hesitating, like he didn't want to be the one to say it. I could feel my stomach tighten as he started to speak, slow and careful. He said, "Mike, I've been debating whether to tell you this, but I think you need to know." And then, just like that, he dropped the bomb. He told me that for the past few weeks, he'd seen Lisa around town, but not alone. She was with another guy, and not just any guy. Some rich-looking guy, nice car, fancy clothes, the whole package. At first, I didn't believe him. I mean, why would I? Lisa and I were fine, weren't we? Sure, we had our moments, but nothing serious enough for this. I laughed it off at first, saying, "You must be mistaken. Lisa wouldn't do something like that." But Greg didn't look like he was joking. He just stood there, quiet, waiting for me to process what he'd just said. It felt like the ground was shifting under me. My mind started racing. Could it be true? Was Lisa really cheating? I didn't want to believe it, but the seed of doubt was planted. I tried to shake it off, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop replaying Greg's words in my head. Every smile Lisa had given me recently felt different. Every time she was late getting home, I started to wonder. Still, I pushed it all down. Maybe Greg had seen someone else. Maybe he was wrong. But deep inside, I could feel the crack forming in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. After Greg told me about Lisa, I tried my best to forget about it. I mean, it couldn't be true, right? Lisa wasn't like that. We'd been through too much together. But the thing about doubt is that once it's in your head, it doesn't just go away. It sits there, gnawing at you. I spent the next few days convincing myself that Greg had made a mistake. Maybe he saw someone who just looked like Lisa. Or maybe the guy was just a friend, nothing more. I came up with every excuse in the book, because the alternative, well, I wasn't ready to face that. But even as I told myself these things, a part of me couldn't let it go. Every little thing started to feel suspicious. If Lisa was 5 minutes late getting home, I'd start wondering where she had been. If her phone buzzed and she didn't check it right away, my mind would start racing. Was she hiding something? Was this what Greg had seen? I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it grew. Every time I looked at her, I questioned whether I really knew her at all. I hated that feeling, the feeling that I was losing control over the one thing I thought I could rely on. It wasn't just the suspicion, though. It was the denial, too. I wanted so badly to believe that Greg was wrong, that Lisa was still the woman I thought she was. But with every passing day, that belief felt weaker and weaker. It was like I was holding onto something that was slipping through my fingers, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get a grip on it. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything Greg had said. Was he trying to help me, or had he planted this seed just to see if it would grow? I didn't know what to think anymore. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Part of me wanted to confront Lisa right then and there, to demand answers. But another part of me wasn't ready. Because if I asked, if I really pushed, and the answer was what I feared, I knew there'd be no going back. So, I waited. I told myself I needed more proof, something undeniable. But deep down, I knew I was just buying time, trying to hold on to a world that was already starting to crumble. After Greg's revelation, it wasn't just the suspicion that started eating away at me. It was something deeper, something that hit right at the core of who I am. I started thinking about the guy Greg mentioned, the rich guy, the guy with the fancy car and expensive clothes, the guy who, on paper, had everything I didn't. And the more I thought about it, the more it got to me. I've never been a rich man. I've worked hard, sure, but life hasn't exactly been generous. I've always had to fight for what I've got, and even then, it's never been much. Lisa knew that when we got together. I thought she didn't care about money or status. But now I started to wonder if I was wrong. What did that guy have that I didn't? Was it the money, the lifestyle? Did Lisa see something in him that she thought I couldn't give her? These thoughts, they tore me apart. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about who I was. I started doubting everything. Was I not good enough? Had I failed as a husband, as a man? Every time I looked in the mirror, all I could see was the man Lisa had possibly left behind for someone better, someone richer, someone who could give her more. It felt like no matter how hard I tried, I was never going to measure up. The successes I'd had in life felt small, insignificant. My hard work seemed pointless. What was the use in all of it if, in the end, Lisa could just walk away to someone else who had it all handed to him? I couldn't stop comparing myself to this guy, this faceless man who seemed to have everything I didn't. And with each comparison, my self-esteem took another hit. I'd always prided myself on being loyal, on being there for Lisa. But now it felt like none of that mattered. Not loyalty, not love, not all the years we'd spent building a life together. I felt like a failure. Like I had failed to be the man Lisa needed, the man I thought I was. I couldn't take it anymore. The sleepless nights, the doubts, the constant questions gnawing at me. Every time I looked at Lisa, I felt like I was seeing someone I didn't know, a stranger wearing the face of the woman I had married. It was too much. I had to know the truth. One evening after dinner, I just couldn't hold it in any longer. She was talking about her day, something about work, but But I wasn't listening. My mind was racing. The words were on the tip of my tongue, and before I could stop myself, they spilled out. "Lisa, is there something you need to tell me?" She froze, mid-sentence, and that's when I knew. I could see it in her eyes. The guilt, the panic. She stammered, trying to brush it off, but I wasn't backing down this time. "Greg told me about you and the guy you've been seeing, the rich guy." There it was, the moment of truth. I watched her face go pale, and she sat there, silent, like the words had been sucked out of her. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but all I could do was wait for her to say something, anything. When she finally spoke, it wasn't an apology or an explanation. It was just excuses. She tried to downplay it, saying it wasn't serious, that she didn't mean for it to happen, that it was just a mistake. But hearing that only made it worse. A mistake. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door or leaving the stove on. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. She chose to be with him, to betray everything we had built together. And now, sitting there in front of me, she expected me to believe that it was somehow less because she didn't mean for it to happen. I felt a wave of anger rush through me. All the doubts, all the self-esteem issues I'd been dealing with suddenly boiled over. I wanted to shout, to throw her words back at her, but instead I just asked one simple question. Why? She didn't have an answer, at least not one that made any sense. She mumbled something about how he had more money, how he made her feel special. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All the years we'd spent together, all the sacrifices, the memories, and it all came down to money, to some guy who made her feel special. That's when I realized it wasn't just about him. It was about us. Or maybe it was about the fact that there was no longer an us. Whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, it was gone. After that confrontation, everything felt like a blur. I don't even remember the rest of the night. I just sat there, numb, staring at nothing, while Lisa cried and tried to explain herself. But I wasn't listening anymore. It was like a part of me had shut down. I thought I'd be angry, furious even, but what I felt was worse than anger. It was this deep, hollow ache in my chest, a pain I couldn't fix, no matter how hard I tried to push it down. The life I thought I had, the trust I'd built with Lisa, it was all gone, shattered into a million pieces. I couldn't stop thinking about how stupid I'd been, how blind, how I had spent so much time convincing myself that everything was fine, when all along she'd been lying to me. It hurt more than I could have imagined, and the worst part was I didn't know how to make it stop. One minute, I'd feel this crushing sadness, like my heart was breaking all over again, and the next, I'd be filled with rage, not just at Lisa, but at myself. How did I let this happen? How did I not see it? I'd always thought I was stronger than this, but now, I didn't know who I was anymore. I wanted to yell, to scream, to do anything to make the pain go away. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape it. The memories of us together, the plans we'd made, they all felt like a lie. It was like the person I loved didn't exist anymore. And I was mourning not just the end of our marriage, but the death of that belief. Some nights, I'd just sit in the dark, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Was I supposed to forgive her? Move on? Was there even anything left to save? I felt lost, like I was drowning in my own emotions with no way out. After the initial shock wore off, I found myself facing the hardest decision I'd ever had to make. Do I stay with Lisa and try to fix things, or do I leave and start over? It felt like I was standing at a crossroads, but both paths looked equally painful. On one hand, there was a part of me that still wanted to believe we could fix it, that somehow we could rebuild the trust that had been shattered. We had so much history together, years of memories and shared experiences. Was I really ready to throw all of that away? What if we could get past this? What if there was still something worth saving? But then, every time I thought about staying, I'd remember what she had done. The lies, the betrayal. It was all so fresh in my mind. How could I ever trust her again? Every time she was late, every time she looked at her phone, I'd be wondering, doubting. Was that how I wanted to live? In a constant state of suspicion? I knew if I stayed, it wouldn't be the same. Our relationship would never go back to what it was before. That innocence, that belief in each other, it was gone. And I wasn't. After I decided to leave, I knew I couldn't go through it alone. I needed to talk to someone, to get some perspective because my head was all over the place. So, I turned to the people who had always been there for me, my friends and family. The first person I called was my brother. He's always been the more grounded one, the type of person who doesn't get rattled easily. When I told him what had happened, there was this long silence on the other end of the phone. Finally, he just said, "Mike, I'm so sorry." It wasn't much, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. I didn't need advice right then. I just needed someone to understand how much this hurt. Over the next few days, I reached out to a few close friends. Each conversation was different, but the support was the same. Some of them were angry for me, telling me I deserved better, that Lisa didn't deserve another chance. Others were more reflective, asking if I'd considered counseling or working through it. But no matter what advice they gave, the thing that mattered most was that they were there. Just having someone to talk to vent to, made it all feel a little less heavy. I wasn't looking for someone to make the decision for me. I'd already decided to leave, but hearing the people I cared about validate my feelings helped. It reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting. This betrayal was real, and it was okay to feel hurt. Talking to my parents was probably the hardest. They'd always liked Lisa, and in some ways, I think they saw her as part of the family. When I told them the truth, I could see the disappointment in their eyes. Not in me, but in the situation. My mum tried to hold back tears, and my dad, well, he just shook his head. But even then, they didn't push me to stay or leave. They just wanted me to do what was best for me. In those conversations, I found strength I didn't know I had. My friends and family reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, that no matter what happened, they had my back, and knowing that gave me the courage to move forward. After those conversations, something shifted inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't drowning in the chaos. I had made my decision, and while it hurt like hell, I knew deep down it was the right one. That's when the real healing began. At first, I didn't really know what healing meant. I thought it would be this quick process, like flipping a switch from broken to okay. But it wasn't like that. It was slow, almost painfully so. Some days I woke up feeling like I could conquer the world, ready to move on, and other days I'd find myself back in that same emotional pit, wondering how everything had fallen apart. But each day, I got a little stronger. I started with the basics, taking care of myself. Simple things like going for a run, eating right, and not letting myself wallow for too long. It's funny how, when everything in your life feels out of control, focusing on the little things can make such a big difference. I started to feel like I had some say in my life again. Then came the self-reflection. I had a lot of time to think about everything, what had happened, where it had all gone wrong, and how I could move forward. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life as the guy who got cheated on. I needed to be more than that. I needed to reclaim who I was, separate from Lisa, and that meant facing some hard truths about myself. I'll admit, there were moments when I questioned myself, when I wondered if I had done something to push her away. But the more I reflected, the more I realized that her actions were her own. I couldn't control that, no matter how much I might have wanted to. I started talking to a therapist, and that was a game changer. For the first time, I had a safe space to unpack everything without judgment or expectations. It wasn't easy. Digging through the hurt never is. But it helped me make sense of the mess in my head. Little by little, I started to let go of the anger, the bitterness, and most importantly, the self-blame. I also started focusing on what I wanted for the future. For so long, my life had been wrapped up in my relationship with Lisa, but now I had the chance to figure out who I was outside of that. What made me happy? What did I want to do next? It was a strange kind of freedom, scary, but also full of possibility. The more I embraced this new chapter, the more strength I found. I wasn't just healing from the betrayal, I was rediscovering myself. I realized that despite everything, I wasn't broken. I was still standing, still capable of finding happiness. And that realization that I could move forward was the first real step in healing. I never thought I'd be ready to meet someone new so soon after everything with Lisa. In fact, for a while, I convinced myself that I wasn't. The idea of starting over, of opening up to someone again, it terrified me. Trust felt like this fragile thing that could shatter at any moment, and I wasn't sure if I could handle being hurt like that again. But then I met Sarah. It wasn't anything dramatic, like a whirlwind romance or love at first sight. It was simple. We met through a mutual friend at a small gathering, and we just clicked. I wasn't looking for anything, and I don't think she was either, which made it easier somehow. There were no expectations, no pressure, just two people having a conversation. At first, I was guarded. Every time I felt myself getting close to her, I'd pull back, afraid of getting too attached. I'd been burned before, and the scars were still fresh. But Sarah was different. She didn't push, didn't demand anything from me. She was patient, letting things unfold naturally. And over time, I realized I wasn't just enjoying her company, I was starting to trust her. That's when the fear kicked in again. Could I really trust someone after what had happened with Lisa? Every now and then, the doubts would creep in, making me question everything. I'd find myself overanalyzing little things, like if she didn't respond to a message right away, or if she had to cancel plans. My mind would go back to that place of suspicion, like it was trying to protect me from getting hurt again. But Sarah wasn't Lisa, and the more time I spent with her, the more I realized that she wasn't giving me any reason to doubt her. She was open, honest, and when I told her about what had happened with Lisa, she didn't shy away from it. She didn't make me feel broken or like damaged goods. Instead, she listened and she understood. Trust didn't come easy, but with Sarah, it started to feel possible again. We took things slow. No rush, no pressure, just one step at a time. There were moments when I still questioned myself, when I wondered if I was ready for a new relationship. But Sarah made it clear that we didn't need to label anything or rush into something I wasn't prepared for. What surprised me most was how much I wanted to try. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something healthy, something based on mutual respect and understanding. And that scared me too, because it meant I was finally moving on from Lisa. I was letting go of the past, little by little. With Sarah, I started to believe in the possibility of trust again. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And every time I took one more step forward, it felt like I was leaving a little more of the pain behind. As time went on, something changed. I realized I wasn't just rebuilding trust with Sarah, I was falling in love. And it was different this time, in the best way. With Lisa, there had always been this undercurrent of uncertainty. Like I was constantly trying to prove something. But with Sarah, it was easy. There was no need for grand gestures or trying to be someone I wasn't. I could just be myself, and that was enough. Happiness started to creep back into my life, slowly at first, like I wasn't sure I deserved it. But with Sarah, it felt natural. We spent time together, shared our lives without any of the pressure or tension I had felt before. It was like a weight had been lifted, and I was finally free to enjoy the moment. I couldn't help but compare it to what I had with Lisa. With her, everything had been so complicated. There were always expectations, always something I felt I had to live up to. I was constantly worried about whether I was doing enough, whether I was enough. But with Sarah, that pressure wasn't there. She accepted me as I was, and I didn't feel like I had to chase some impossible standard. I started to see that love doesn't have to be hard. Sure, relationships take work, but they shouldn't feel like a constant battle for approval. With Sarah, things just flowed. We laughed more, talked about everything and nothing, and just enjoyed being around each other. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The pain of the past wasn't gone completely, but it no longer controlled me. I could look back at my relationship with Lisa without feeling like it defined me. It was part of my story, but it wasn't the end of it. With Sarah, I discovered that love can be easy, and happiness can be real. It wasn't something I had to fight for. It was something I could simply embrace. And that made all the difference. Just when I thought I had put everything behind me, life threw one last twist my way. Out of the blue, I got a message from Lisa. At first, I wasn't sure if I should even open it. I'd moved on, started building a new life with Sarah, and honestly, I didn't need to revisit that part of my past. But curiosity got the better of me, and I read it. It was a long message filled with apologies and regret. She told me that the rich guy, the one she'd left me for, had dumped her. Apparently, after a few months, he found someone new, someone younger, and left her high and dry. She didn't go into too much detail, but it was clear that things hadn't turned out the way she thought they would. She had been living in a nice place while they were together, but now, well, now she was back in a small apartment in a not-so-great neighborhood, struggling to make ends meet. And then came the part I wasn't expecting. She asked if we could talk, said she had made a terrible mistake, and that she missed what we had, that she missed me. She even hinted that maybe, if I could forgive her, we could try again. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at my phone, trying to process what I was reading. The woman who had shattered my heart, who had chosen someone else, was now asking for a second chance. And to be honest, a part of me felt vindicated, like the universe had come full circle, and now she was the one on the outside looking in. But that feeling didn't last long. The truth is, I didn't feel anything for Lisa anymore. The pain she caused, the betrayal, it had all faded. I wasn't angry with her, and I didn't hate her. I just didn't care. She was part of my past, but I had moved on. I had found happiness again, real happiness, with Sarah. And there was no way I was going to throw that away to reopen an old wound. I didn't respond to Lisa's message. There was no need. The chapter with her was closed, and I wasn't going back. I had learned too much, grown too much to fall into that trap again. Whatever happened to her was no longer my concern. In the end, I realized something important. I didn't need revenge or an apology or even closure from Lisa. I had already moved on. I had found someone who truly loved and respected me for who I was, and that was all the closure I needed. Lisa had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had my own life to live, and for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy.